My husband tried to control my career choices, so I took back my life. Everyone thought Liam was the perfect husband, including me, until I realized perfect meant obedient. I used to be one of those people who rolled their eyes at relationship drama on Reddit. I'd read posts about controlling partners and think, that could never be me, I'm too independent for that. Funny how life loves to humble you when you think you've got it all figured out. I'm Emily 29 now, but this story starts when I was 24. I was working as a marketing associate at a mid-sized firm in Boston, hustling through late nights, caffeine, and endless PowerPoint decks. I love my job. Marketing wasn't just a career, it was creativity, energy, storytelling, everything that made me me. I had this dream of starting my own agency someday. I even had a name picked out, Northlight Creative. Cheesy maybe, but it meant something to me, the idea of helping brands find their true north. That's when Liam came into the picture. He wasn't the kind of guy you forget. Not because he was loud or flashy, quite the opposite. He had that quiet, confident aura that made people lean in when he talked. He was a financial consultant, early 30s, clean cut, sharp dresser, and with a calmness that instantly made me feel safe. We met at a mutual friend's engagement party. I remember spilling wine on my dress in the first 10 minutes. Classic Emily. And he appeared out of nowhere with napkins and a joke that actually made me laugh through the embarrassment. Looks like your dress wanted to start the party early, he said, smiling. Yeah, it's just jealous of the champagne, I shot back. He chuckled. Not in that fake, polite way most guys do, but like he actually heard me. It sounds ridiculous now, but that moment felt like the start of something. And I was right, it was. Just not in the way I imagined. We talked the whole night about work, goals, travel dreams. He seemed genuinely fascinated by my job, asking thoughtful questions. You must be amazing at reading people, he said once. That's a superpower in itself. My heart melted a little at that. After years of dating guys who either saw me as too ambitious or not available enough, here was a man who seemed to celebrate my drive. Or so I thought. Our first few months together were what I'd call movie perfect. Weekend brunches, spontaneous road trips, late night talks that stretched till dawn. He was thoughtful, remembered my coffee order, texted good morning every day, picked me up after work just to surprise me with takeout. My friends adored him. My mom said, he seems like someone who will take care of you. That sentence hits different now. He'd say things that felt so sweet at the time. I love that you work so hard, Em, but don't forget to rest, okay? You deserve to relax too. Or, you don't need to stress about that client. Let me take care of dinner tonight. At first, I thought it was love, someone looking out for me after years of doing everything myself. I didn't see it as him gently nudging me to slow down, or rather, to stop. When you're falling in love, red flags often look like fairy lights. The first small thing happened 3 months in. I had a big presentation for a potential client, one that could have landed me serious recognition at work. The meeting was scheduled for Saturday morning, and Liam had planned a weekend getaway for us. When I told him, I expected him to be proud or at least understanding. Instead, he sighed and said softly, I just thought we could have one weekend without work. You've been so tense lately, Em. You can't keep living like that. I froze. It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it. Calm, disappointed, like I'd let him down, and I hated that I cared so much about that disappointment. So I canceled the presentation, told my boss I wasn't feeling well. The client went to another firm. But hey, we had a wonderful weekend lakeside cabin, wine, laughter, and his arms around me saying, see, isn't life better when you slow down? At the time, I thought he was right. That's how it started. Soft, subtle, and wrapped in love. 6 months in, he started making little suggestions about my work clothes. Babe, that outfit's a bit much for the office, don't you think? You're gorgeous, but I don't want guys staring. Or, you look amazing, but you don't need to impress anyone at work. You already have me. I used to think possessiveness was romantic when it came with a smile. Now I know it's not romance, it's control dressed as affection. But back then, I laughed it off, changed my outfit, told myself it was no big deal. Because when someone you love tells you something gently, you listen. Especially when you're raised to think relationships are about compromise, even when that compromise chips away at who you are. Liam was so effortlessly good at appearing caring. If I came home late, he'd already cooked. If I talked about a bad client, he'd say, you don't have to keep proving yourself to these people. You're better than this. At first, that sounded empowering. Later, I realized it was isolating. He wasn't saying, you can do it. He was saying, you shouldn't try. The deeper we got, the more he started using we instead of you. We should think about your next step. We don't want you to burn out. We'll figure out what's best for us. It sounded like teamwork. It was really controlled, disguised as unity. Still, I loved him. God, I loved him so much. He made me feel safe and chosen. He always said the right things when I was anxious, and when he proposed a year later in the middle of a candlelit dinner at my favorite rooftop restaurant, I didn't hesitate. I said yes through tears. My friends screamed, my mom cried, and everyone said, you're so lucky to have found someone like him. Lucky. That word haunted me later. The wedding was beautiful, small, intimate, everything I dreamed of. White roses, soft music, the kind of day people post about with captions like, "Forever starts now." And for a while, forever looked perfect. Liam was attentive, loving, gentle. He'd wake me with coffee, kiss me goodbye every morning, text me reminders to eat lunch. It all felt like love, the kind that wraps you up so tight you never want to leave. Except, over time, that tightness started to feel like pressure. About 3 weeks after the wedding, something huge happened. I got an email from an agency I'd interviewed with before the wedding, a leading creative firm in New York. They wanted me. Full-time position, high pay, leadership potential. It was everything I'd worked for. My hands were shaking when I told Liam, expecting him to lift me in joy. He smiled, but it wasn't the reaction I expected. "That's amazing, babe," he said slowly. "But New York? That's far from here. What about our plans? The house? Starting a family?" I blinked, confused. "Liam, it's a once-in-a-lifetime offer. We can make it work. You can consult from anywhere." He sighed, walked toward me, and took my hands. His voice softened, almost fatherly. "I just think maybe you should wait a little. We just got married. Don't you think our marriage deserves some focus before we jump into something that'll keep you busy 24/7 again?" The words stung, but they were so reasonable. Who could argue with focus on the marriage? I smiled weakly and said, "Maybe you're right. I'll ask if they can delay the start date." He smiled wider, kissed my forehead, and said, "That's my girl." And just like that, I convinced myself it was the right decision, that marriage required sacrifice, that love meant putting us before me. That night, as I lay next to him, my mind replayed the email, the job title, the excitement, all of it fading under the warmth of his arm around me. "You made the right choice," he whispered, before I fell asleep. I believed him. It wasn't until much later that I realized what that choice truly cost me. Not just a job, but a piece of myself I'd never get back so easily. But at that moment, it felt like love. Because that's how control begins, softly, sweetly, wrapped in good intentions, disguised as care. I used to think love was supposed to make you feel safe. Now, I know, the right kind of love doesn't make you smaller to feel safe inside it. He never yelled, never hit, but I still learned to ask for permission. It didn't happen overnight. Control rarely walks in wearing combat boots. It tiptoes in wearing slippers. After turning down that New York offer, life with Liam slid into a rhythm that everyone around me called married bliss. We bought new dishes together, argued playfully about where to hang the wedding photos, and binge-watched Netflix on weeknights with takeout cartons scattered across the couch. To anyone else, it looked perfect. And for a while, it felt that way too. But something in me had started to shrink just slightly, like fabric in the wash. It began with harmless-sounding questions. "Do you really need to take your laptop to bed again? I thought Fridays were our nights. Why'd you agree to that dinner with coworkers? You look stunning, but maybe wear the blue blouse instead. It feels more, professional." Always said gently, always followed by a kiss on my forehead. He had this calm tone that made me feel guilty for even thinking he might be wrong. I'd change the blouse, shut the laptop, cancel the dinner. Because honestly, I told myself, that's what good wives do, they listen. And Liam wasn't cruel, he was considerate. He made dinner when I worked late. I just sent good morning texts every day and told everyone how proud he was of me. Yet, I started noticing I didn't make decisions anymore, we did. Or, more accurately, he did. And I followed. At work, things were picking up again. My supervisor, Claire, pulled me aside one afternoon and said, "Emily, your campaign for the Eco brand? Stellar work. You have real leadership instincts." Her words filled me with a jolt of the old adrenaline, the same fire I used to feel before everything became about we. For the first time in months, I felt alive. That night, I told Liam, expecting him to beam with pride. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That's amazing, babe," he said, then paused. "But you've been stressed lately. Maybe don't take on too much. Remember last time you pushed too hard, you couldn't sleep for days." He rubbed my shoulders while saying it that soft, affectionate tone again. "I just want you healthy." I nodded, even though my gut twisted. By the end of the conversation, I'd convinced myself he was right. I'd slow down. Later, when I looked at our reflection in the mirror, I caught myself wondering when I started needing permission to chase something I loved. Then I brushed the thought away. The thing about manipulation wrapped in concern is that it feels like love until it doesn't. A few weeks later, I met Maya for coffee. My old coworker, the one who'd always been the loudest cheerleader for my dreams. She looked me up and down, frowned, and said, "You okay, Em? You look tired." I laughed it off. "Just married life," I joked. "Married life or controlled life?" she said quietly. Her words stung. I told her she was being dramatic. But when I got home, I found myself editing our conversation before telling Liam. I left out the part where she questioned him. I didn't want to see that flicker of disapproval he got whenever someone didn't adore him. Even my mom had started noticing. On a call one evening, she said, "Sweetheart, you sound different lately. Everything all right?" "Of course," I said. "Just busy." She hesitated. "You've always been busy, but you never sounded so careful." That word sat heavy in my chest. Careful. That's exactly what I'd become. I was careful with my words, careful with my plans, careful not to upset the delicate calm of our home. Liam didn't like raised voices. He said shouting was for people who couldn't communicate maturely. So we never fought. Not really. I just learned to surrender early so we wouldn't have to. When I got invited to a friend's birthday dinner downtown, he smiled and said, "Go, of course." But when I returned that night, he was sitting on the couch, TV on mute. "How was it?" he asked. "Fun," I said. He nodded slowly. "Who was there?" I listed names, then he asked, "Did James show up, the one who used to flirt with you?" I laughed. "He's engaged now, Liam." "I know, I just worry. You know how guys can be." That night, I promised I'd text him more when I was out. It seemed harmless, but soon, every outing came with a play-by-play. Still, he never yelled, never accused, just worried. When you live inside that softness long enough, you stop noticing the cage because it's padded with compliments. Months passed, and my world narrowed to our apartment and my office desk. I turned down 2 networking events because he said they'd mess with our weekend plans. My wardrobe shifted subtly, fewer bold colors, more muted tones he called elegant. Then came the promotion offer. Claire called me into her office one Tuesday afternoon. "Emily," she said, "we're launching a new regional campaign. It'll involve some travel, maybe twice a month, but you'd be leading the team. I think you're ready." For a second, my breath caught. It was everything I'd wanted. Leadership, trust, growth. I drove home that evening buzzing with excitement. I'd already imagined telling Liam, maybe celebrating with dinner and champagne. But when I told him, his expression barely changed. "Travel? How often?" "Just twice a month, maybe less. It's an amazing step forward, Liam. They picked me." He set down his fork and looked at me with those calm, deliberate eyes. "I'm proud of you, Em, really. But do you think now's the best time? We barely see each other as it is." I blinked. "Twice a month isn't that bad?" "It's not about me," he interrupted softly. "I just don't want you running yourself into exhaustion again. You said you wanted us to start planning for a family next year, remember? If you're gone, half the time." His voice trailed off, leaving guilt in the air like smoke. I stared at my plate, my appetite gone. "I guess I didn't think of it that way." He reached across the table, squeezed my hand. "You're so talented, Em. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You already have everything you need here." That night, I lay awake, the promotion email glowing on my phone. I read it again and again, my finger hovering over the reply button. I wanted to say yes, every part of me screamed yes, but his words kept replaying, "You don't need to prove anything." By morning, I typed a polite decline. "Thank you for the opportunity, but I'll have to pass it this time." When I showed Liam the message, he smiled like I'd done something noble. "I knew you'd make the right choice," he said. "You always know what matters most." I nodded, forcing a smile, but inside, something cracked, a small, quiet snap I couldn't ignore. That weekend, we went out for brunch with friends. They asked about work, and I heard myself saying, "Oh, I'm just taking things slow." Taking things slow. That had become my whole personality. Later that night, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Same eyes, same face, but the spark behind them was dimmer. I couldn't remember the last time I'd laughed loudly without checking who was around. I realized then that I'd started narrating my choices through him. Would Liam approve? Would this make him upset? I didn't recognize myself anymore. He never yelled, never hit, but somehow I'd learned to shrink my world down to the size of his comfort zone. And the worst part? I'd helped him build the cage one soft, loving word at a time. I thought he wanted what was best for me until I realized he only wanted what was best for him. I remember the exact moment everything started to crack. It wasn't some explosive argument or betrayal. It was a simple text. A message from Maya. "Hey Em, long time. Saw your old campaign for the eco brand pop up on my feed. Still brilliant as ever. Coffee soon?" I stared at my phone for a solid 5 minutes before replying. It felt like someone had just reached into my old life and pulled out a piece I'd forgotten I even had. Maya and I used to be inseparable at work, brainstorming until midnight, laughing about impossible clients, eating cold noodles from the break room fridge. She'd been my creative twin. And then, when I left the firm after marrying Liam, I just disappeared. Not intentionally. It's just somehow every time I tried to meet her, Liam would say, "You're so tired, love. Don't you want a quiet night in?" Or, "That place she wants to go isn't really your vibe, is it?" And I listened. Every single time. But when I got Maya's text, something in me itched to say yes. So I did. "Would love that," I typed before I could overthink. "Saturday?" She replied instantly. "Perfect. Same cafe as always?" That old cafe, the one with the mural of painted sunflowers and jazz music that smelled like nostalgia, felt like a portal back to myself. Saturday morning, I actually took time getting ready. I put on my old denim jacket, brushed my hair into loose waves, and even wore lipstick for the first time in months. I felt alive. Then Liam walked in. He was holding a mug of coffee, hair slightly messy, that just woke up softness that used to make my heart melt. "Where are you off to, sunshine?" he asked casually. "Oh, just catching up with Maya," I said, trying to sound breezy. His smile faltered just a fraction. "Maya, from your old job?" "Yeah, she texted me out of the blue." He took a sip of his coffee, then set it down. You haven't talked in what, 2 years?" "About that," I said carefully. He chuckled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Well, don't let her guilt you into anything." You've changed, Em. You're not that stressed out marketing girl anymore. I know, I said, slipping on my jacket, but it'll be nice to catch up. He nodded slowly, then added, You look great, by the way. Maybe a bit overdressed for coffee? My hand froze on the doorknob. It was the kind of comment that sounded harmless, maybe even like a compliment. But something about the way he said it made me feel suddenly self-conscious. Still, I smiled and left. When Maya saw me, she squealed so loud the barista laughed. Emily freaking Reed, look at you, she said, hugging me like it hadn't been years. And for the first time in forever, I laughed without checking if it was too loud. We talked for hours about old projects, mutual friends, her new startup gig. She even pulled up some of my old work on her phone and said, You were always the best creative we had, Em. I still quote, Your authenticity sells better than perfection line. I almost teared up, because I used to believe that. But somewhere along the way, I'd started living the opposite. Are you still working? She asked. I hesitated. I do some stuff from home? She raised an eyebrow. You mean you used to work from home? Or you actually do? I smiled weakly. A bit of both. Emily, she said, lowering her voice. You loved your career. You used to light up talking about campaigns. What happened? And that's when I said the words I hadn't even admitted to myself. Liam thought it was best if I took a break. He said I was burning out. Maya leaned back. Did you think that? I guess. I don't know. She stared at me for a long moment. You sound like a person who's afraid to upset someone just by existing. That sentence hit harder than it should have. When I got home that evening, Liam was on the couch scrolling through his phone. He didn't even look up. How was it? Good, I said cautiously. He nodded. Yeah, she didn't bring up work, did she? I froze. Why would she? He finally looked up, his eyes cool and steady. Because she's the kind who will make you feel like you're missing out. You're not missing anything, Em. You're happier now, right? I didn't answer. He smiled. Good. A week later, I started feeling that spark again. I found a small freelance listing online, nothing big, just a social media campaign for a local bakery. It felt harmless, exciting even. I didn't tell Liam. I just wanted to do something for me. When I sent my first draft to the client, I felt that old thrill, the rush of creating something from scratch. I was smiling when I walked into the living room that night. Liam was sitting there, laptop open, brows furrowed. Hey, I said softly, want some tea? He didn't look up. Emily, why did I just get a PayPal notification for a freelance deposit? My stomach dropped. He turned the laptop toward me and there it was. My name, the bakery's name, the transaction. Oh, I managed. It's just a small side project. Side project. His voice wasn't loud, but sharp. You mean you took a job without telling me? It's just a few hours a week? He stood up. Do you even hear yourself? We agreed you'd take it easy, focus on us. And now you're sneaking around like some teenager? I wasn't sneaking. You lied. He said it so quietly it scared me more than if he'd shouted. I didn't lie, Liam, I whispered. I just didn't think it was a big deal. He took a deep breath, rubbing his temples. Emily, do you have any idea how that makes me feel? Like you don't trust me. Like I'm not enough. And there it was, the guilt, the weapon he always used. It's not about that, I said weakly. He shook his head. I worked so hard to give you everything, and this is what I get? A wife who hides things from me? Tears burned behind my eyes. I just wanted to do something I love. He stared at me for a long, cold moment. You love me, right? Yes. Then trust me when I say this work can wait. We need us to be strong first. I nodded, even though something inside me screamed no. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my chest heavy. He never yelled, never hit, but somehow I still felt small, controlled, invisible. The next morning, he acted like nothing happened, made me pancakes, kissed my forehead, even played my favorite music while we ate. See, he said, no stress, no fights, just us. And part of me wanted to believe him, because believing him was easier than fighting. But later, when he went to work, I sat at my desk and opened a new folder on my computer. I named it Truth. Inside it, I started saving everything: messages, screenshots, notes of what he said. Not because I planned to leave him, not yet. But because for the first time, I realized I might have to. Maya called again that evening. You okay? She asked, instantly hearing something in my voice. Yeah, I lied, just tired. She didn't push. You know, Em, sometimes the people who say they're protecting us are really just protecting their version of us. I didn't respond, but her words stuck like a seed in my chest. That night, while Liam slept beside me, I lay awake scrolling through my old work, the campaigns I used to run, the people I used to lead, the woman I used to be, and I realized something terrifying. I didn't know that woman anymore. Over the next few weeks, things subtly worsened. Liam started checking my phone, just to be safe. He'd scroll through my messages and say things like, why do you need to talk to Maya so often? I thought we were trying to stay positive. He'd question what I wore when I went out, not aggressively, just with that condescending concern. Maybe wear something more professional, love. You don't want people to think you're desperate for attention. Every criticism came wrapped in fake affection, every restriction disguised as care. And I fell for it, piece by piece. Until one night, I looked in the mirror and didn't see me. I saw his version of me. Soft-spoken, careful, permission-seeking. That's when truth hit me hard enough to make me gasp. This wasn't love. It never was. It was ownership, and I'd handed him the key. So I took a deep breath, opened my truth folder again, and added a new note. He doesn't love who I am, he loves that I listen. And for the first time in years, I whispered to myself so softly even the walls couldn't hear. I want me back. That night was the breaking point. Not because anything dramatic happened, but because I finally stopped believing him. And once that belief cracked, everything else would soon follow. When you live in someone else's shadow long enough, the sunlight almost hurts. I didn't wake up one morning suddenly brave. There wasn't a big movie-style moment where I looked in the mirror and decided, that's it, I'm leaving him. It was slower than that. Quieter. Like thawing ice, barely noticeable at first until you realize the river underneath has started to move again. After that night, the one where I started my truth folder, something in me shifted. I didn't act on it right away, but I started noticing. Every sigh. Every, "you're overthinking, babe." Every time he touched my shoulder like punctuation, ending a sentence I didn't get to finish. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. It began small. I told Liam I was going to a yoga class. I wasn't. I was going to therapy. A friend of Maya's had recommended Dr. Patel, a trauma-informed therapist who specialized in emotional manipulation and narcissistic relationships. I didn't think I was in one. I mean, Liam wasn't cruel. He never hit me. He didn't scream or cheat or call me names. But something inside me whispered, "Go anyway." Her office was calm, pale yellow walls, soft lamps, a faint smell of lavender. She smiled when I walked in. "Emily, I'm glad you're here." And somehow, those 5 words broke me. I cried before we even started. When I finally stopped apologizing for crying, she said, "You don't have to justify emotion here. You've probably had to do that a lot, haven't you?" I nodded, slowly. Over the next few weeks, we talked about Liam, about how I always felt like I was one wrong word away from disappointing him, how he made me question my memory of things like, "I never said that, you're twisting it," or "You're just tired, love, you always get like this when you don't sleep." Dr. Patel said quietly, "That's gaslighting." The word hit me like a cold wind. She leaned forward. "Emily, what you're describing is emotional abuse. It's subtle, but it's real. He's training you to doubt your instincts and rely on him for your sense of truth." I stared at her. "But he loves me." She didn't flinch. "I believe he loves the control he has over you. That's not love, Emily. That's ownership disguised as care." I left her office shaking, but for the first time, the shaking wasn't fear. It was awakening. Once I started therapy, I began reclaiming small things. I re-downloaded Spotify and made a playlist, not one we shared, not our songs, but mine. The ones I used to blast while driving home from work, messy, loud, unapologetic. Then I reached out to Maya again. This time, I didn't lie about it. I just didn't tell him. We met for lunch and I told her everything. The control, the guilt, the gaslighting. She didn't interrupt me once. When I finished, she took my hand and said, "You've been surviving, not living, but you're not crazy, Em. You're just waking up." That word waking up stayed with me all day. A few weeks later, I started freelancing again, quietly. I used a pseudonym, Ella Rhodes, and created a simple website with just my portfolio and contact form. At first, I took small gigs, product captions, email campaigns, brand consultations. Nothing that would leave a paper trail Liam could trace. But every project I finished felt like oxygen. Like I'd been underwater for years and finally took a breath. Liam, meanwhile, began to sense the shift. It wasn't anything I said, I still played the part. Still made his coffee, still smiled when he came home, still listened when he talked about work. But he could feel it. He touched my arm longer than usual, as if grounding me back into his orbit. He'd ask, "Everything okay? You've been distracted lately." And then came the alternating tactics, love and guilt. One night, he brought home flowers. "For my favorite girl," he said, kissing my forehead. "I know I've been hard on you lately. I just want what's best for us." The next day, he sighed over dinner. "You barely talk anymore, Em. Sometimes I feel like you're not even here." It was dizzying the way he'd pull me close one moment and push me away the next, just enough to keep me spinning around him. Dr. Patel called it the cycle of reinforcement. I called it exhaustion. One afternoon, while Liam was at work, I set up my small office in the spare room, the one that used to be his storage space. I cleared out old boxes, added a desk, a lamp, and my laptop. When I looked around, it didn't look like much, but it was mine. That's where Ella Rhodes came alive. And she started to thrive. Within a month, I'd gained 3 steady clients. By the second, I was getting referrals. It wasn't big money yet, but it was mine. I started saving in a secret account. Not for luxury, for freedom. The more confident I grew, the more Liam unraveled. He started showing up at my desk randomly. "Hey, what are you working on?" "Just reading some blogs," I'd say casually. He'd nod, but his eyes would linger. Sometimes he'd check my phone pretending it was a joke. "Just making sure my wife's not running off with a millionaire," he'd laugh. Other times, he'd guilt trip me for not spending enough time with him. "I miss how we used to be. You're always somewhere else lately." I'd smile softly. I'm just trying to get back to who I was, Liam. He'd sigh, eyes softening. You don't need to, love. You're perfect just as you are. But the thing was, I wasn't. Not for him and not for me. Therapy sessions became my anchor. Dr. Patel once said something that changed me entirely. Emily, he's not just controlling you, he's redefining your reality. The more you shrink, the more space he takes. And that was the moment I decided to start expanding again. I said yes to brunch with my mom. Yes to Maya's invitation to a small networking event. Yes to doing my hair the way I liked it. Yes to color to clothes, to lipstick, to laughter. And no, finally, no to guilt. One night, Liam walked into the living room and froze when he saw me laughing on a Zoom call with Maya and a few other women. What's this? He asked. Just catching up, I said, closing my laptop. He smiled tightly. Didn't realize you were so busy lately. Yeah, I said calmly. It feels good. He didn't say anything, but that night, he slept facing away from me. The next morning, he was all charm again. Breakfast in bed, hugs, a movie suggestion. Love bombing, guilt, silence, repeat. But now I could see it, and seeing it made it lose power. The first time I used my Ella Rhodes income to pay a bill, I cried. Not because it was a lot, it wasn't, but because it meant I didn't need to ask for permission. It meant I was capable, independent, alive. I started keeping my essentials packed quietly: passport, cash, a few clothes. Not because I was leaving yet, but because I needed to know I could. That small bag under my desk became a symbol, a quiet rebellion wrapped in fabric. Then came the day my pseudonym Ella Rhodes got her first feature. A small online magazine did a piece on independent women entrepreneurs. I'd submitted anonymously, thinking nothing would come of it, but they published my story. Ella Rhodes, a freelance marketer redefining authentic branding. I read the line over and over. It wasn't about recognition, it was about validation. Someone saw me again. Not Liam's version, me. That evening, Liam came home early. I quickly minimized the article on my laptop. He kissed my cheek and said, I missed you today. Something about the way he said it, that heavy, possessive sweetness, made me realize how far apart we'd grown. I smiled. You'll be fine. He laughed softly. You sound different lately. I feel different. And for once, I didn't apologize for that. Later that night, while he was asleep, I opened my truth folder again. It was filled now, dozens of entries, screenshots, voice memos, little notes about every manipulation I'd lived through. And beneath it all, I added a new document titled Plan. Inside I wrote, 1. Keep saving. 2. Get an apartment small but mine. 3. Tell Maya when ready. 4. Leave quietly. No drama, no goodbyes. I closed my laptop, heart steady for the first time in years. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't shrink away from it. Because she was right. Sunlight hurts when you've lived in shadow, but it also heals, and I was finally ready to let it touch me again. That day, I hit publish on my website under the name Ella Rhodes Creative Studio. My business was live. My life finally was mine again. And though Liam didn't know it yet, that click was the first crack in the cage he built. The awakening had begun. The day he found out about my business was the day I stopped being afraid. It started like any other morning, quiet, ordinary, deceivingly peaceful. I was sitting by the window, coffee in hand, sunlight spilling across my laptop screen as I worked on a client project. My alter ego, Ella Rhodes, was thriving. The small business that began as a whisper had grown into something tangible: real clients, steady income, glowing testimonials. And best of all, Liam still didn't know, or so I thought. It happened a few weeks after my article got published online. I'd been careful, meticulous, even about keeping my identity hidden. I used a separate browser, different email, even a fake LinkedIn profile. But you can't plan for coincidence. That day, Liam came home early. Too early. I didn't even hear the door until I saw his reflection in my laptop screen behind me. Hey, I said, forcing calm. You're home early? He didn't respond, just stared at me. Not at me exactly, but at the screen. My heart froze. The tab, the one with my freelance dashboard, was still open. Ella Rhodes Creative Studio. He read aloud, voice cold. That's catchy. I swallowed hard. It's just a side project. His eyes lifted to mine. A side project? He repeated, almost laughing. Is that what we're calling lies now? I closed my laptop slowly. Liam, please. No, please mean nothing. His voice was sharp, unfamiliar. How long has this been going on? How long have you been sneaking around pretending to be someone else? I wasn't sneaking, I said softly. I was working. For me. He scoffed. For you, right. Because apparently, being my wife isn't enough anymore. That word enough hung between us like poison. I'd heard it before, but never like this. Never with that edge of contempt. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at him. The man who used to trace constellations on my back now looked at me like I was a stranger. Liam, I said quietly, this isn't about you. I just wanted to do something I love again. He laughed bitterly. You mean something I didn't approve? That's what this is really about, isn't it? You don't like being told what's good for you, good for me? I repeated. You told me quitting my promotion was good for me. You told me isolating from my friends was good for me. You told me losing myself was love. He stepped closer, jaw tight. You're twisting things. No, I said, standing up. For once, I'm untwisting them. The silence that followed felt electric, the kind that hums right before lightning strikes. His voice dropped low. Do you have any idea how this makes me look? My wife lying about a business behind my back? Our friends are going to think... Your friends, I interrupted. The ones who only know the version of me you've curated. He blinked, caught off guard. Wow, you've really been talking to your therapist, huh? That's when I realized he knew about that too. How do you... Your location history, he said flatly. You're not as clever as you think, Em. Something cold ran down my spine. You went through my phone? I had to. You've been acting distant, secretive. What was I supposed to think? That I'm allowed privacy? He slammed his hand against the wall, not near me, but close enough that the sound made me flinch. Don't make me the villain, he hissed. Everything I've ever done was for us. For you, I said, my voice shaking but steady. It was always for you. That's when his mask slipped completely. He started pacing, running his hand through his hair. You think you can survive without me? That little fake business of yours? You'll crash and burn, Emily. You need me. You always have. I stared at him. The man I once thought was my anchor now looked more like a storm. No, I said quietly. I did need you, but I don't anymore. He froze. For a split second, I saw the panic flash in his eyes. Not sadness, not remorse, fear. The kind that comes from losing control. Don't do this, he said, softer now, almost pleading. You're emotional. You don't mean what you're saying. But I did. I'd never meant anything more. The argument stretched for hours. Every tactic in his arsenal came out: denial, blame, guilt, tears. At one point, he sat on the couch, head in his hand, whispering, You've changed, Em. You used to be kind. What happened to the woman I married? And I said, She started to realize kindness doesn't mean surrender. He looked up then, eyes wide, and for the first time I think he saw me. Not the docile version he molded, but the woman underneath. That night, after he went to bed, I called Maya. My voice was shaking, but my decision wasn't. Maya, I said, I need to get out. There was no hesitation on her end. Say when. 2 days later, while Liam was at work, Maya came over with boxes and coffee. We moved quickly: clothes, laptop, important documents, that small bag I'd kept packed for months. Each item I placed in a box felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I half expected Liam to burst through the door, shouting, apologizing, something. But he didn't. Maybe he thought I wouldn't really go through with it. Maybe he still believed I was too afraid. He was wrong. When I locked the door for the last time, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow, numb, but also free, the kind of freedom that's so vast it terrifies you. Maya drove me to her apartment. We didn't talk much. She just reached over once and squeezed my hand. That night, I filed for divorce. The next few weeks were chaos, texts, calls, threats. Liam oscillated between begging and fury. You're making a mistake. You'll regret this. I still love you, Em. You're ruining both our lives. I didn't respond. I forwarded every message to my lawyer, every voicemail to my therapist. And for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to defend myself. Because I finally understood something Dr. Patel once said. You can't reason with someone whose power depends on your confusion. The last time I saw Liam was at mediation. He looked smaller somehow, still polished, still confident, but hollow. He leaned toward me before it started and whispered, You'll come back. You always do. I looked him in the eye and said, Not this time. He laughed under his breath. You think you can handle the world without me? I smiled softly. I already am. After it was over, I went back to my new apartment, tiny, messy, imperfect. There were boxes everywhere, half-unpacked furniture and echoes bouncing off the walls. But when I stood there, surrounded by the remnants of a life I was rebuilding from scratch, something inside me cracked open, not from pain, but from release. I sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, and started to cry. Not because I missed him, not because I was lonely, but because, for the first time in years, no one was watching me cry. I didn't have to soften it or hide it or explain it away. It was my sadness, my tears, my healing. Later that night, I opened my laptop. My truth folder was still there. Pages of notes, evidence, fragments of a past that once defined me. I didn't delete it. I just added a final entry. He tried to control my career, my choices, my voice, but in the end, his control gave me clarity, and clarity gave me freedom. I saved it, closed the folder, and shut my laptop. Then I turned off the lights and stood in the silence, pure, clean, mine. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of him, not of failure, not of being alone. The sunlight coming through my window that morning wasn't the same kind that used to sting. This time, it felt warm. This time, it felt like a beginning. Freedom didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like silence, peace, and coffee I didn't have to ask permission for. It's funny how something as small as a cup of coffee can become a symbol of everything you've lost and everything you've regained. The first morning after I moved out, I woke up in my new apartment, a small, sunlit one-bedroom with peeling paint and the faint smell of someone else's life before mine. There was no polished kitchen island, no neatly folded towels that Liam insisted had to match the aesthetic, no sense of walking on eggshells before saying good morning. There was just me, my mismatched mugs, and the cheap coffee machine Maya helped me buy. When I poured that first cup, the steam rose like a quiet rebellion. I didn't have to ask anyone if it was okay to use the good coffee beans. I didn't have to worry about whether I was making too much noise. It was just peaceful. And in that silence, I realized something. Peace can feel terrifying when you've spent years in chaos. I sat on the couch the second-hand one I dragged up the stairs with Maya, laughing and swearing the whole way, and I cried. But this time, it wasn't grief. It was release. I wasn't Mrs. Liam Anderson anymore. I wasn't the supportive wife. I wasn't the woman who gave up her dreams for love. I was Emily. Just Emily. And that was enough. For weeks after I left, I lived like someone learning how to breathe again. At first, I couldn't stop looking over my shoulder, half expecting Liam to show up at my door, armed with apologies or threats. That's the thing about people like him. You spend so long fearing their disapproval that even when they're gone, the echo of their control still lingers. But he didn't show up. Not once. Maybe he was too proud. Maybe he was already trying to rewrite the story, telling his friends that I abandoned him. I didn't care. The truth was, I didn't want revenge. I wanted recovery. I kept going to therapy every week. My therapist, Dr. Alvarez, became this anchor in my healing. She helped me unpack every subtle thread of manipulation that had wrapped around me for years. One day, I told her something that had been haunting me since the first months of our marriage. I used to feel lucky when he said, "Don't worry, I'll handle it," I admitted. Now I realize he was training me to stop handling anything. Dr. Alvarez nodded, her voice calm but firm. Control often hides behind care, Emily. When someone limits your world for your own good, what they're really doing is taking ownership of your autonomy. It hit me hard, because that was exactly what Liam did, and I had thanked him for it. Bit by bit, I started piecing myself back together. I reconnected with old friends I'd ghosted under Liam's influence. Some were cautious, unsure if I'd really changed or if I'd go back to that life, but most welcomed me with open arms. Maya, of course, was my rock. She'd come over every Friday night with Thai takeout and a bottle of cheap wine, and we'd talk for hours about everything: work, healing, love, and how freedom sometimes looks like crying while assembling IKEA furniture at midnight. One night, she looked at me over her pad thai and said, "You know, Em, I'm proud of you. You didn't just leave him, you found yourself." I laughed through tears. I still feel broken sometimes. "Good," she said with a smirk. "It means you're human, but you're not shattered, you're reshaped." My freelance business started taking off too. The small marketing gigs I'd started in secret, the ones Liam once called a hobby, were suddenly becoming something real. Clients loved my work. I started getting referrals. My evenings, once filled with tension and tiptoeing, were now filled with brainstorming sessions, creativity, and the joy of doing what I loved. One afternoon, I got an email from a woman named Jordan, who ran a startup that supported women-owned businesses. She wrote, "We've been following your work online under your brand name M Creative. Your story and your style resonate with us. Would you be open to collaborating or even speaking at our next event?" I reread that email 10 times. Then I just sat there, hand over my mouth, crying and laughing all at once. Someone wanted to hear from me. Not from Liam's wife. Not from the woman who was told to be grateful for what she had. Just me. The event was 2 months away. A women's empowerment conference in Chicago. Part of me panicked. Public speaking wasn't exactly my comfort zone, and sharing my story felt terrifying. But another part of me, the part that had spent years swallowing my words, whispered, "It's time." So I said yes. Those 2 months became a blur of preparation, growth, and quiet reflection. I redecorated my apartment, not to impress anyone, but to make it mine. I filled it with plants, most of which I accidentally killed, art prints that made me smile, and photos of me laughing real laughter, not the tight-lipped smile I used to wear around Liam's friends. Every morning, I'd wake up, brew my coffee, open my laptop, and think, this is the life he tried to keep from me. Then the conference day came. The ballroom was buzzing with energy. Women in suits, casual dresses, hijabs, braids, heels, sneakers, all gathered for one reason: to celebrate strength, survival, and success. When my turn came to speak, I stood backstage, palms sweaty, heart pounding. Maya had come with me for moral support. She squeezed my hand before I went on. "You've got this, Em. Just tell your story. You've already lived it. Now, let others learn from it." I walked onto the stage to polite applause, clutching the mic like it was my last anchor. "Hi, I'm Emily," I began, voice trembling slightly, "and I want to talk about something that doesn't always leave bruises, but it leaves scars all the same." The room fell silent. I told them about how control can start with love, how it can sound like I'm just looking out for you and feel like safety until it's not. I shared how I once gave up my dream job because I thought it would make my husband happy, how I stopped wearing certain clothes because he said they weren't professional, how I learned to ask before I made choices that should have been mine to make, and then how I found my way back. I didn't name Liam. I didn't need to. The story wasn't about him anymore. It was about me. By the time I finished, there were tears in the audience and in my own eyes. When I said my final line, the one I'd written in my journal months ago, it felt like reclaiming every word I'd been silenced from saying. He tried to control my life, but in the end, he only helped me find it. The applause was overwhelming. People stood, some cried, a few came up to hug me afterward and whispered, "Thank you. That's my story too." And that's when I realized my pain had a purpose. In the weeks that followed, that speech went semi-viral. Someone had recorded it and posted it online. Suddenly, my inbox was full of messages from women and men, sharing their experiences, their fears, their courage. Some wrote, "I didn't realize it was abuse until I heard your story." Others said, "You helped me lead." Each message felt like a small piece of healing, not just for them, but for me too. Because for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone in my story. One evening, I sat by my apartment window, watching the city lights shimmer below. A cup of coffee in hand, dark roast, extra strong, and the gentle hum of traffic outside. I thought about everything that had happened. About the girl who thought love meant sacrifice, and the woman who finally learned that love, real love, never asks you to shrink. Liam had once told me, "You'd fall apart without me." And now, here I was, whole, thriving, and happier than I'd ever been. It wasn't fireworks, it wasn't grand gestures, it was the quiet joy of knowing I didn't have to ask for permission anymore. I could travel when I wanted, work how I wanted, dress, laugh, exist without apology. That's what freedom truly felt like. A few months later, I got invited to consult for a global marketing firm, a full circle moment. The kind of opportunity I'd once given up because Liam said, "Married life comes first." I didn't hesitate this time. And as I signed the contract, I whispered to myself, "I come first." Sometimes I still catch glimpses of my old self in the mirror, the scared, unsure version of me who used to say, "Maybe he's right." But then I remember how far I've come. And I smile. Because now, when I look at my reflection, I don't see the woman he tried to control. I see the woman who took back her story. That's what I want to leave you with, especially if you're reading this and recognizing pieces of yourself in my story. Control doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. It looks like protection. It sounds like care. But real love doesn't shrink your world, it expands it. And if you're standing at the edge of leaving, scared of what comes next, let me tell you this. Freedom isn't always loud or glamorous. Sometimes it's just a cup of coffee you didn't have to ask permission for. And that, my friends, is what healing tastes like. He tried to control my life, but in the end, he only helped me find it. All right, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the story. We have so many more amazing stories coming your way. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. Our goal is to reach 100K subscribers by the end of this year, and we'd love for you to be part of this journey. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.